Welcome to the level set. I am joined by the Dr. Charles Alexander, the Mike Jones, and we just got word that we'll be joined later by Dr. Jerry L. Kwame T. Christmas. We are
aka our own Charlie Parker. You will hear him playing and coming through the door, okay?
coming
All the
through the
way up to the
door. He gonna get
coming
out
to
the
the
car play.
bandstand.
We are going to continue to deal with this notion of our community and what we think are some of the elements that we need to directly address. Today, we're going to deal with self-alienation in the micro, but we're looking at a much larger problem as we try, as Mike Jones states, constantly to properly get a theory of the case, and we do not. So bear with me as I read a passage from, this is a book that's titled Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. And this is by Dr. Amos Wilson. And he has several just cogent issues. And I have a fairly long read, so please bear with me as I get into it. And Dr. Wilson defines self alienation refers to the inability to positively actualize and actively exercise one's personal and cultural endowments due to a lack of awareness inhibitory fear, distortion, or underdevelopment of those endowments. Self alienation involves being separated from one's real self, that potentially organized and dynamically integrated set of emotional, intellectual, behavior, social, spiritual, and acquired social historical capacity, which under conducive environmental social conditions can be used by the individual to achieve optimal well-being. Karen Horney, in her book Neurosis and Human Growth, contrasts what she refers to as the real self, the original force toward individual growth and fulfillment, with which we may again achieve full identification when freed of the crippling shackles of neurosis. What the actual self, i.e., everything that a person is at a given time, body and soul, healthy and neurotic, and the idealized self, i.e., what we are in our irrational imagination, or what we should be according to the dictates of neurotic pride. Self alienation is a precursory condition which allows the alienated person to be effectively manipulated to his own disadvantage and to the advantage of inimical exploitive agents. For blacks, these agents are their white oppressors. Self alienation is the condition which motivates the person to internalize alien values, perspectives, and other characteristics antithetical to his own interests. Through self alienation, the alienated person acquires certain predominant ways of relating to himself, others, and the world that empowers those agents responsible for his self alienation in the first place. Self alienation devolves from having the real self degraded, impaired, associated with negative characteristics, threats of injury or annihilation. Should the alienated person identify with it, having its history and future possibilities distorted, diminished, or is obscured by misidentification, falsification, and denial. Furthermore, it devolves from having the alienated person physical attributes and potentials vulgarized, associated with repulsiveness, as well as other negative intellectual, emotional behavior, and characterological stereotypes or factors. He is frightened of self discovery and therefore cannot attain self fulfillment despite the fact that the means to do so may be readily available to him. He must be for and live for someone or something other than himself. He cannot define himself. He is defined by others. He is externalized, controlled from the outside. He is not centered. His definition, self concept, Self satisfaction, self direction, and happiness must be secured from outside sources.
Okay, you can drop the mic. That's the show. Okay. Matter of fact, that's 400 years of history of Black people in America, and it's particularly acute in the last 150, I'll say, from post uh, the emancipation period that included uh, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and now post civil rights, where uh, I think the self alienation has really uh, become a cancer that's malignant because we now do it to ourselves as opposed to doing enslavement. It was an overt physical act that negated your personhood, and you could literally understand that it was being what was being done to you because it was physically being done to you. Our lack of just understanding advanced social sciences, okay, from psychology to sociology, and to be fairly illiterate when it comes to serious fiction and literature with character development and all the stuff that goes in it, uh, means we really don't have the basis to understand what you just said in mass. And we go to college every day.
Some of us.
A lot of us don't.
Okay. No, I'm saying some of us go to college every day.
Yeah. No, and that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about a lot of the some of us that go to college because if all social animals are hierarchical, okay, that means and that doesn't and a hierarchy doesn't have to be undemocratic. It just means that there's some divisions of labor that have to do with rank. One of the things that the folks at the top at the top and near the top of the hierarchy have to do is they have to know and understand all of this because they're responsible for making decisions that fundamentally direct and impact the herd. Okay, if folks further down in rank don't quite understand all of this, it's not as critical because they're not in leadership positions and they won't have to understand that the people at the top understand it and we're all connected because they're going to create a sociological or cultural environment that mitigates the self-alienation because that's the leadership issue. The leadership issue is the what is it Kipling said, that the strength of the pack is the wolf and the strength of the wolf is the pack. So inherent in nature, when you become the leader, you become responsible to steward the welfare of the pack, the herd, whatever you want to call the social group. And you get some privileges that come with that responsibility. But when the pack or the herd or the group is at risk, it is the leaders that go to meet to the point of attack to defend. And my little barbershop theory of that is that the life that the pack or the herd gives the leader owes the pack that life. So that means that's why they don't go back and get the 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 the, the, the regular folks in the herd or the pack. when the pack, the herd is threatened, the leaders come to the front. And that happens in every social animal but humans. It would never occur to a male lion not to defend the pride.
That is correct.
It wouldn't occur to him.
He's not going to say he has bone spurs.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think for me is what you just said, and I'm cheating a little bit because of our red room discussion, but I think you have to marry what you just read and what Charles has talked about at least every other week when we're here. And now I know what they call it, social alienation. We have to connect that intellectual understanding to a better understanding of the organic nature of the organization of nature. Okay, if we just look, if we were just observant people, we would observe just what I just said. When I look at all other social animals, their leadership, they have leadership structure, they have hierarchy. Sometimes the hierarchy, if you're at the bottom of it, don't look as fair as it is at the top. But to kind of quote Hobbes, what you get for that is the ultimate defense of you by the leader. And the leader don't get to question that. The leader sacrifices his life, not your life, for the protection of the herd, for the protection of the pack.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting and on point as always.
Now that's a metaphor. I'm not saying it with lines and
It is an application that can serve as a metaphor, but it's an application. That's
well, I
applied
read
in
some.
this society.
I saw a quote the other day by somebody. I can't think of the guy's name. He's a mathematician. He said all models are wrong, but some are useful. Okay.
Dr. Alexander, what are your thoughts?
All of that y'all said. And so the and the piece of it is grappling with all of this stuff to realize that that is a point so that we arrive at self-alienation. And so and a part of what Amos Wilson is saying is that that we arrive there because of the falsification of a consciousness, right? And so what's our consciousness? So our consciousness is literally our awareness of, you know, who we are and where we came from and how we came to be. And so our consciousness has been falsified because of the process of us coming to be here. And so many of us believe that we are here because of our singular, meaning, you know, when I say our singular, I mean Black folks' own devices, that we were singularly our own worst enemies, and that's how we ended up vulnerable to this situation, and that's how we ended up here, right? Well, that's probably not
Well,
our
let's hash it out, Doc. You are bringing up an important question. We believe that we are being punished generationally because of our disobedience from Africa. We were taken away as slaves, as stated biblically.
And so, and so even when we do that, we are taking someone that too. So like we struggle to even contemplate that um our allegiance to the Bible. It kind of goes back to what Mike. I don't know if Mike. I think Mike said it in the green room. You know, so if I don't choose, I'm gonna choose Moses, not Jesus. And so we're struggling with the concept that we even chose this. We chose a particular biblical narrative. So even with the oppressed condition, we didn't have to choose that biblical narrative because both narratives are in that Bible, and we choose Jesus collectively. That's what Black folks choose. We choose Jesus,
And if you
and
choose
so
Jesus, you don't have to work. But if you choose Moses, you're going to have to work for that land. Moses, he said, I'm going to give you that land, but you're going to have to kill them.
and
Go over
so
there and
this.
size them up. But we don't
And,
want to work for that, though.
well, we could get to that point too. But my point in even bringing it up is that too, from in a social political sense of it, is also a manifestation of false consciousness because that's not our story. That's us adhering to somebody else's uh, origin myth. That ain't ours. So our fundamental issue is that we see our origin through a other person's lens, and that's fundamentally false consciousness. So that's the first order of false consciousness. And then in the second piece, we believe that we just we don't recognize we can't recognize that this first order piece, this first element of false consciousness is so because we can't recognize that it's not ours and we can't we cannot detach ourselves from it because this has been the nature of it. And so we see ourselves in the system, we start to blame ourselves not for the system, but for our reaction to it, because ultimately we think the system is right. And
Let's
so we
stay there.
can't get out of it.
Let's stay there for 1 second, Doc.
Mm-hmm.
And let's describe what this system does and what we believe is right.
And so and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the reel that Mike sent when the brother was talking about black business. And so he's like, we treat, black businesses treat black folks like whatever words he used. And so, and I'm listening to it and I'm looking at it, and two things come to mind for me when I'm listening to it and I'm looking at it. And one is it's a business. They're supposed to maximize the profit motive is that's prime in the business. So he posted charge as much as he could charge for a haircut. He's posted charge as much as he could charge for a pork chop. That's what you're supposed to do. Now,
Charles,
mm-hmm.
I would hold at that point, but I want to ask a question about that. It has always occurred to me that you can rationalize capitalist practice based on the profit motive because
Mm-hmm.
the object of the activity is to generate maximum profit. Now, there was a time in even capitalist America in the 40s, post World War II, in the 50s through the early 60s, where there was a theory of stakeholder capitalism. There was a profit motive, but the corporation also had stakeholders and not just shareholders, because they were more place-based economies, and so you had businesses that felt responsible for the environment they were in. So, for example, we give away local tax incentives, like child molesters give away candy now. But there was a time in the 50s, 60s that major corporations didn't take, wouldn't even ask for, just wouldn't take local tax as incentives because they say, well, we pay taxes because we need police. Everybody needs police, fire. The streets need to be there because we here too. So this is just all a part of us doing business. So I'm saying this whole notion that the profit incentive maximizing the profit benefit, that's a Reagan, that's a 1980s American economic theories. Okay, now it obviously took root, and everybody who's got money and owns something want to believe that. But to me, what undergirded the first theory or policy direction is a question that we never asked white capitalists in America. What is the object or the objective of an economy? Is an economy here to serve the people, or are the people here to serve the economy? So if you would just back up and ask that predicate, why do we do this? And how you answer that question changes everything. Because if you say the people are here to serve the economy, then everything you just said makes sense. If you say the economy is designed to serve the people, because a society, a social or social unit needs a way to live. That's where agriculture came from when we quit being hunter-gatherers 5,000-6,000 years ago. Then you come up with a different answer that the shit you're talking about, though, none of that makes sense then no more, does it?
No, but and that's kind of where I'm going, and how we kind of get twisted in this piece, because I understand what the brother's point is, but he really ain't talking about. I don't know what his larger thought was, but what he used in his narrative was haircuts and pork chops, right? And so, in my perspective, I'm thinking, well, go buy some clippers, and then you ain't got to worry about a $50 haircut, and eat your pork chops at home. You ain't got to worry about overpriced pork chops. You're a consumer. You got choice, right? So that's a part of my thought to that. But the other part of that thought to that kind of goes back to what you just said. In this system, the economy exists at our expense historically. That is the nature of this thing. And so to be questioning our exploitation in this economy means you don't understand this economy. We are the economy. Even if we the business. So when we say the dollar don't turn around, don't circulate in the Black community, that's predicated on our consumption. Right? Now, you can argue about how much you pay, this, that, or the other, and blah, 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 blah. But we're going to have to spend to do whatever. So it's interesting because we get into these spaces where we can't even have real conversations about commerce because even our understanding of commerce is distorted by our experience. Because you can have this thing is because we've seen that too. So if we study Black banks, going back to the Freedmen's Bank, and going back to after they fleeced it, they put Frederick Douglass in charge of it. Frederick Douglass invests all his money in the interest of the people, right? And so, but he ain't the only person to do it. Many of the early Black bankers did that, and that's also a part of the reason why those entities failed. Not because he put all his money in because to help the Black folks, and not because those subsequent Black banks did nearly the same. It's because this system is not is not built on, it's not predicated on our successful navigation of commercial interests. It is predicated on our exploitation, which meant what? We always have made a fraction of the dollar. And so, since we always have made a fraction of the dollar, even when what we had put in those banks seemed like a lot in mass, it was only relative because we ain't had shit to start with. And so we didn't have. But what we do as we look back on that, instead of learning from these historical things over and over again, we find the best case scenario and try to build that as the standard, which is a failure because the best case scenario has failed in this situation all the time.
And so
Because it's not
again,
just
are we
us, it's the system. But we keep blaming us. That's the falsification
and the lack of context as we
and the lack of context. And
so I mean
so
I
and
didn't mean
so
to
we
interrupt you. I
keep
just
blaming
wanted to add
ourselves
that.
as opposed to understanding that this is the function of this system.
The system isn't broke.
The system isn't broke.
This is the way all systems are designed to get the results that they achieve.
Absolutely. And this thing is designed to do this. But we keep blaming us for the outcome. Now, the issue where we have to assume some blame is that at a point we got to be more critical. We have to use more critical thinking. We have to conduct more analysis about the system at present and historically. Historically, so that we could see ourselves in this thing along the way. And so this is a part of what Larry and I were talking about, Mike, before you hopped on, is that like in all of these things, we don't really understand our place in these historical pieces. And that's really kind of that's what John Henrik Clarke talks about. And that's what Carter G. Woodson talks about. It's like, it's about seeing ourselves in his, it's not about this grandiose thing that we've done, the most grandiose. It's about our place because that gives you concept and that gives you context. And from that, you can actually build and do whatever and grow. But we struggle because we continue to struggle to the degree that we continue to struggle with that part. We can't reconcile our part in this system, and that's the false consciousness. We don't recognize the system, and we don't recognize that, and because we don't recognize the system, we don't recognize that we act the way and that we think and behave the way that we behave, that we think and behave the way that we do in large measure because of the system.
Let me ask you a question, Charles. There in H. Rap Brown transitioned to the ancestors this week, and obviously it brought back a lot of memories for me. We all here are in the frat or in a frat, and and one of the things people will talk about is when did you go over and who made you. And for me, two brothers, I went over in someplace between 1966 and 1968, and the two brothers that made me were Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and H. Rap Brown. Abdul Alami, I can't get his whole Muslim name. But that's when all of this the foundation that my father built. That's when it got imprinted on me. So I've always thought of myself outside of the system and never wanted to be in it. I mean, that's the other thing. So I guess my question to you as a psychologist professional, uh, why is there always this almost one-sided tension in any oppressed group about the inability, but before the inability, the unwillingness to embrace your otherness and then separate from your oppressor? And that goes back to the thing we were talking about, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, it is kind of like I'm not serving the king, man. Okay, that's all. That's a story about. And the king says, if you don't serve me, I'm gonna throw you in the furnace. He said, well, you can do that. He said, he asked them, will your God save you? He said, if not, it still don't make no difference, man. I ain't serving you.
And,
So
and like, because when we talk about the
wait a
story,
minute. I was gonna say now we got black theologians, preachers teach the Bible, but they don't never teach that as a point of resistance.
what I was about to say, when we teach that story, we teach about who else was in the fire. We don't teach the emphasis in the story isn't the resistance. The emphasis in the story is that there was somebody else in the fire, which I think is strong, but the reason they got thrown in the fire was because of the resistance.
And you could argue that the reason God saved them because they were resisting.
Because they were resisting. That's why he was in the fire. He was there for them because they resisted. That was it. Yes, but that's not really how we. That's not.
But we don't teach it, and that kind of goes back to something we were saying earlier. Uh, why what you're looking at is a huge undercurrent in this mega period that we're in to reimpose these religious and cultural hierarchies and myth because that's what keeps people contained and willing to accept their oppression because
That's what the Christian that's what the
that
Christian soldiers are predicated on.
right.
And these things again, where we so the reason that we buy into this thing and we end up self alienated is because of the power of the oppressor to propagate. Propaganda is real, and so then if if we don't engage in the critical analysis, then we can't get to what actually makes sense. We keep going, with whatever the propaganda is. So another piece. So like this passivity piece, because there's a way that even uh, uh, with that narrative that we get Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we can get them passive in that narrative too,
Right.
right? When in reality, it's the resistance. It's the resistance, and so, but we have all of these distortions. So, and and then when we fast forward, when we get to Jesus, we get distortions. The people wasn't homeless; they was traveling. When they left the house, she was pregnant. And when they got to Bethlehem, she was delivering. They weren't homeless. They make they just hadn't made so they had to stay where they stayed in order for her to deliver and blah 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 blah. But they were second class citizens. They were under the rule of these other folks, but they wasn't homeless. They wasn't put out. They wasn't. It was and so we distort. We start to take an active role in the continuous distortion to the degree that we don't actively take a role in the critical analysis of things that are available to us to analyze. So we say stuff like, if you don't want black folks to know, put it in a library. And then nigga don't go to the library. If that's where you think the answer is, go. That's our fault. That part is our fault. If you think you actually know the answer, there's some stuff they don't want you to know. Okay, well then know it. And so we say these things, but we don't do these things. It's very easy to fall back into the thing because ultimately you believe that the system is right.
Wait a minute, but Charles, and if you live in a hierarchical universe, and I'm going to argue that the hierarchies in no matter how you imagine the universe or society or small group or tribe, or there's going to be hierarchies. Like I said, but the hierarchies can be democratic. Okay, and I'm talking about as a value system. So the question then becomes, as long as, and usually all hierarchies, all social systems have some theory about why things are the way they are, that justify things are the way they are. So if you ascribe to a religion that makes your ultimate liberation the function of some supernatural occurrence,
something external,
of an external supernatural occurrence, because it ain't showing up every day, it's going to show up, then you've eliminated your sense of agency, your ability to impose your will on the universe. Because, like I say, you're not, as I said earlier, you're not looking for Moses, you waiting on Jesus.
mm-hmm.
And Jesus said, I would apologize, if there was a bit of time, I would apologize for saying this to the church folks, but the truth is, Jesus ain't coming. And you're gonna be like the two guys waiting for Godot in Samuel Beckett's play. I mean, you gonna have a lifetime to discuss it and wonder where he is and all of that. And when your time comes, and then you bought into a theory of the case that's not even a theory, because a theory is a testable hypothesis that can be proven, or at least can be refuted. It can't be a theory if it ain't testable and provable. So, I mean, the whole notion that this is the way it's going, and you're taking somebody's word for it who took somebody else's word for it, and no matter how far you go back in the story, you have no evidence that it happened that way. And the guy you attribute it all to never wrote nothing down. He's like Socrates. What we know about Socrates is what Plato said, because Socrates didn't write anything down. He's illiterate too. So, and the people
and
that
we don't
wrote,
even have a good sense of who wrote down what we say has been
that
written.
was going to be my point. The people that wrote it down were not his peers. None of them was there when he said it, did it, whatever.
Oh man, Mike, let's hear from Kwame. on these issues, and I know he has been enjoying this exchange. But I want to hear from him on the topics that we've covered since he has been attending.
I'm chiming in. I'm getting so much knowledge from what I'm hearing. I'm like the listeners on the show, actually, because everybody is right on point. It's nothing I could argue against in the points that have been made by both Dr. Alexander and Mike Jones when it comes to these topics. And it's just interesting that when we're able to sit down and have this critical thought, how you can really get to some real answers when you do this critical thinking. And that is the problem. We don't take the time to do the critical thinking. A lot of times individuals will say they don't have the time to do the critical thinking, but they do have the time to do the critical thinking. And it is the propaganda. It is the propaganda that constantly keeps us off track. But everybody is right on point, and we don't have the evidence to support what we do with religion, and it's a major problem because there's a major impact in our community.
And we don't have, and we're using religion because it ends up being kind of this huge, like, because we got that's it's literally like the gift that keeps on giving. It's like that pattern just continues and continues and continues because we have all of these things, all of these checks in place that keep us from being critical in that space. Well, you going to hell. That's sacrilegious.
Right. That's what
You
I
don't
was just getting
believe,
ready to
right?
say.
And
If you
so
criticize it,
yeah,
if you criticize that, you're going to hell,
you
or
going to
even if you
hell.
criticize the pastor, because I've been in that position. I have criticized the pastor with the whole church, and it was a situation when our pastor was leaving, and I was the only one to stand up to say something, and they made me all feel like I was the devil. They all, it was not making sense. It was not making sense at all. And the pastor was looking to go to another church. He was supposed to be there that weekend um, for the announcement at the new church. And I simply asked the question, did we send someone down there to see if he showed up? Because if he showed up, there's no need for him to come back and have a meeting with us. And when I raised that question, the chair of the board said, "Well, no, we didn't send anybody down there because, as far as we concerned, we still have a pastor." The whole church erupted, in applause. And I was thinking, these are the dumbest people in my life. You know what I'm saying? But that's how they make you feel. And so I understand why people will be hesitant to criticize, and especially if you start, even in the culture we're in right now, even when you know that um, pastors have issues just like everybody else does. But if you attempt to criticize anything that the church is doing, they come down on you extremely hard.
And so then, and again, so the challenge with this conversation today is that somebody listening to this can't see our critique of the church from a social so within the context of of it being a part of a larger social construct, right? And so somebody's going, they talk about it. We going to hell, right? When
Mm-hmm.
in reality, the issue is that the church starts to mirror
Wait a
the
minute. And
larger
Charles,
experience of Black folks who can't question the system that
and,
we
and,
live in.
and Charles, to that question is, yeah, I'm going to hell. That's where all my friends go be, and I ain't going to spend it. And I wouldn't want to spend eternity with people who I didn't hang out with
Who I
here.
ain't
Okay,
know and I ain't hang out with anyway,
right,
right?
Views
exactly.
expressed, Jesus,
We
by
say
Mike
my people
Love.
in hell anyway.
The views
And
expressed
so,
by Jesus, the views
but like
expressed by
we
Mike
don't even
Jones. Yes,
start
Lord.
to
And could
look
I
hell
at
want
could
to see
could
your
hell
face,
be
Bob,
worse?
if
Could
it's
hell
your
be
will,
worse
Bob.
than what we
You don't have
already
to have
going
me
through?
sitting there to the right
well,
hand,
and
brother.
that becomes the
Just let
thing,
me.
Attorney Chris, is that and that's how we get back
We in hell now.
that's how we get back to the three Hebrew boys and the furnace, right? It's like, why I said I'm riding with this,
Right.
and so if I'm riding with this, then that's what it's gonna be. I'm gonna resist.
Right.
What's what's going to be worse than the resistance? So you already treating me crazy. And so why would we believe? And this is just how we got to look at this. Why would we believe that they weren't going to end up in the furnace anyway? That is the nature of the system. That was their relationship to the system. Right? So they chose what they believed. And for that, they were saved. Not by the system, but who they said was their savior. Right? And so we get confused, and that's a part of what the falsification is. We keep saying that, so we would just be in the fire, burned, singed, everything. Because we keep saying we ride with Jesus. We pick white folks every day. You got folks looking back over time, because again, we don't do well with, the stories and the narratives. We got folks looking back every day talking about how passive, Black folks have been collectively, yet we are here. So it can't be that we just ain't never put up no resistance. It is that for every battle that we win, these jokers are going to create 3 to 4 more. And so we're always fighting, and we're always outmanned, and we're always outgunned. So our victories are few and far between, but they come, right? But if you believe in us, then we'll probably have more victories more frequently. But if ultimately you end up vulnerable to the propaganda, then the thing, it gets longer and it stays longer and it exists in perpetuity.
And Charles, my take on that is you have to redefine, or you have to define for yourself what victory is. And my position is oppressed people win when they resist, not when they overcome.
Ain't that what happened to the 3 boys, right?
Yeah, when you win when you resist.
When they resisted,
don't
they
worry
won.
about overcoming.
When they resisted, they won, right?
Right.
And that, ain't that what we're supposed to learn from that?
You would think.
Yes.
But the propaganda now is so overwhelming.
But now in this thing, you win when you get money.
Well, right. Charles, to that point that you just raised, isn't that what we're supposed to win from, take from that? I don't know what the author intended. That's the advantage of agency. I can take whatever you've created, and let's call it a work of art. And your work speaks for itself. But when it speaks to me, here's what I hear. Now, I don't know what the author intended. But when I read that from my circumstance, this is what I'll interpret it. And when I retell that story, that's the way I'm going to tell it. I'm going to tell it from my perspective, not necessarily his perspective, because I don't know what he intended.
But that's part of the disorientation. That's part of this. You never tell it from your perspective. And your humanity is based on you putting the interests of the system before you. That's the way the system looks at you and values you. And as you said, pays you.
And it don't pay you well.
No, sir. It's not going to pay you to be independent of it, just enough to come back.
And so, and again, we're not studying in the manner in which we need to study. And so we're not doing the critical analysis. And so it's hard for us to understand, it's hard for us to understand the levels of the falsification of our consciousness, which then necessarily leads to the self-alienation. because we're perceiving things and seeing things as well as each other from the perspective of the enemy. And so that creates a separation from ourselves at the individual level, which then facilitates the peace. Everybody, so like this is like the deep conversation. So like when you're looking at Amos Wilson, he's talking about he's saying self-consciousness. You have the falsification of self-consciousness, which leads to self-alienation, which leads to self-hatred.
Mm,
Right.
wonderful,
And
Doc.
so and
Wonderful.
so so you're looking at yourself through the lens of the oppressor who says you ain't jack, right? Who says you ain't nobody. And so then you start to detach from yourself and things that look like you. And so not only then, by virtue of that, not only do you literally hate yourself, you hate things that look like you.
Right. It lowers your overall, it
You,
lowers your self-esteem, and it causes us
your
to interact
individual and collective, right?
collectively.
Yes,
And it
yes.
and it causes us to want to associate more with the enemy. And I think now we have a situation where we at a larger extent want to associate with the enemy at a larger level than we ever have, or even had the ability to associate with them. And I think that's causing even more problems for us.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like in that space, I don't know if it's a more or less. I think it's more because we in it, right? And so like
More because of what? I didn't hear that
because
part.
we're in it, because it's the nature of our situation. You know what I mean? So like we're in it right now. So in hindsight, for those of us who even take the time to look back, it necessarily feels like we internalize it and interpret it as if it's worse than before. But I don't know that it's worse than before because I wasn't before. But I do know stuff happened before. And so like I when the folks gave up on the rebellions, like when they really went and say, hey Massa, you better go find that Nat, you better go find that Denmark, you better go, when them guys gave up the goods, what was worse than that? In South Carolina, it was like if you tell on if you give up the rebel if you give up a plot, we're gonna set you free. Right? So what's more selfish than that?
You've always had that situation.
That's my point. I'm just
You've
saying
always had
that's
that
all that's
situation,
yeah, that's kind
but
of
you've
what my point
always,
is.
but you had, I think, I don't know, I'm not there. It appears that you had more plots going on then. I don't even think people are plotting now for the
Yeah.
rebellion as they were then.
We
I think
plot
people
for
are
the
much more
rebellion every
comfortable.
Saturday.
We
So,
do. Yeah, we do, but I'm just saying collectively across
but
across the black agenda, I don't think there's enough people talking about a plot. There are more people talking about how we can come together with the enemy than plotting against the enemy.
Here,
but
Or be
that's
more
what
like it. But
falsification of consciousness does, and so it creates those same, those steps are going to exist. So if you have the falsification, you're gonna have the self alienation, you're gonna have the self hatred, and you're gonna have the idealized enemy. That's that's how this thing that's how this thing works. Go ahead, Mike John.
I'm going to pose.
And I wanted you to comment on that too, Mike, because it just seems like we're softer now than what we were
Well,
then.
this is what my question comment is about. Because I was thinking about what you and Charles you exchanged just now, and I'm going to say, Gerald, that black. I'm accepting hierarchies as a social reality in all social animals, in all social groupings. That animals that are democratic never live in groups. Okay, tigers don't. There's no pride of tigers. Leopards
Hmm.
going by themselves, right? But all the animals that do whatever they do together, they have hierarchy.
Hmm.
So we live in large groups now. Have for about 10,000 years. When agriculture was invented, we started to settle because you didn't have to hunt and gather; you could grow. But I'm thinking about the the, the first 3 decades, 4 decades of the 19th century, 1820s, 1830s, 1840s. And I'm thinking about who were the black elites of those 3, 4 decades, the pre-Civil War America, and that's who led the resistance to slavery. It was I say it, to me, it, what makes a Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass or Charles Allen, any of them guys, any of those people, folks, so profound is they could have done anything with their life at that point, and they dedicated it to the rest of us, to the rest of their family. So there were no black abolitionists in the slave community. Shit, they could if they could do something, they'd have left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that fight for 3 decades, that point of attack, was all led by black people in leadership who were, quote, free, and if not free, they were not enslaved, but they were always at risk. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you could, I mean, 12 years a slave is about what happens to you when you're free if you get caught going down the wrong street. Okay,
Right.
Well, you go
so
back there with them jokers.
yeah, so the question that you really have to ask is what has changed with us. Let's forget white America, and I make the distinction between white Americans and white America. White Americans are a white American is a individual that could be a really great person or a piece of shit. I don't know, but I know what white America is, and the collective of the identity of white America is what we're talking about. We're not talking about individual people. So white America has always been this monstrosity if you're
Mm-hmm.
black. But for as long as we have memory here, we have always had black leadership to stand against it, even when the odds didn't make sense. When they ultimately couldn't wasn't strong enough to continue to resist, they got overwhelmed. But somebody else, next man up, kind of theory, and something changed with us. Okay,
That's in your lifetime, though, Mike, isn't it?
yeah, that's
When
what
you
I'm
look
talking about. That's what I'm.
in your lifetime, when you look at it and you look back, and when you talk about H. Rap Brown and those that birthed you, you were watching that resistance and learning about that resistance from black people that were out there, that were doing it, that were in a position to do it, they had the freedom to do it and had the money to do it. Now, that is not the same existence for us, myself, and somewhat for me, a little bit, but more so for the generations behind me. I don't believe that that is the same vision.
And that's my question.
They don't
What
see those
happened to us?
Could
individuals
could it
supporting that.
be? Could it be that the brainwashing took effect at some point, and the middle class then began to
It did.
identify success with emulating
The
what
middle
they
class always thought that.
thought to be thought? And well, I'm going to go back to the color
Are
convention.
you saying, Dr.
We're
Alexander, that
gonna.
the middle class
I'm
was
gonna
that
go back to
same
the
way?
with Martin Delaney and those guys. We're talking about Martin Delaney and those guys, and their strive for freedom. I'm
So
not sure if that potentially is the
I,
case, but
I,
I'm just asking. My question is this: could it be that that the brainwashing became effective at some point that we don't know the exact date of, or is this something that has always been the case?
it's always been. And so it was 4 or 5 pastors on the other side of Montgomery who went and cut a deal with the local government during the boycott. This thing always existed.
It
It
may have
was it was
always existed, but it did it always. I don't know if it always
It didn't
existed
always
to this
prevail,
level.
though. It didn't
And did it
prevail.
always
it
prevail?
did
Okay,
Exactly.
prevail. It has
let's
always
tie
prevailed. We've always
let's
continued
tie
to
a
fight.
bow to what Doc said earlier. He talked about the guys that gave up Denmark Vesey.
Yes, it
Right.
He
has
talked
always
about them.
prevailed.
Let's tie
We've
it up.
continued to
And
fight. So the issue,
so are you saying that those were the adjacency class that E. Franklin Frazier talks about that were
yes,
the house
that
jokers
that's what the
then
that's what
that
the
have now
yes.
become the DEI guys for that we would consider DEI guys because we know these guys went to school with us. None of them were ever competent. None of them have bottom line experience. And I'm not talking about everybody. I'm not talking about guys that get in as a result of that, but these guys that have that adjacency that could not, do very, very much. And we're talking about the same class from what you're saying.
J. Edgar Hoover is black.
Wait,
Oh,
Charles,
whoa. Wait a minute.
Charles,
Talk on no. Let him stay there for a minute. Come on. You just stepped out there.
I was just
Say it,
this
partner.
has always been. This is gonna always be, and we're gonna always fight. Now, it's gonna always look different because they recognize they know what they up against. This is literally the
wait,
Empire Strikes
wait.
Back.
Say, Charles, would it be fair to say, because I kind of agree with you, I've always said, wasn't no white folks at the Denmark VZ meeting, okay? So somebody black had to tell, okay? uh, uh, and somebody black told on that turn. So white folks. Well, if we look at Django, uh, 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 what's his name? The actor who played the
Samuel Jackson.
Samuel Jackson.
I know Samuel Jackson character Stephen, but the owner of the plantation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he didn't see the kind. Samuel L. Jackson saw the kind and told it. So let's presume that's always been there, and obviously, if you think about it, it has. Then maybe a flaw of ours is we romanticize our history and we make it more than what the reality was, that the brothers and sisters that we so admire are overcoming white folks and black folks to do what they did. And if there was a whole lot of folks, black folks, doing what they was doing, we'd have got wherever we was going faster than we've gotten here. Would that be a fair analysis?
Yes.
But we over romanticize the past anyway. The thing
Yeah,
about how many old relationships that we, prior to us finding the right one, we thought
right,
would be okay.
right,
And so so this is what it looks like. But this is the resistance, right? And so you gotta fight that fight the whole time, and you keep going. So we find our way back to kind of like the same analysis all the time in different ways because this is what has to get at. This what got to be analyzed. It's like how we got here. What does it look like while we here? And what are we pushed forward? For the next post. So so this gets recorded for a reason, right? So like we're gonna be these people who like right now we just these guys. 20, 30 years from now, this is gonna be gold. These gonna be floating around. This is the underground, right? So this is what it is. So if we go back and you talk about H. Rap Brown, okay, so we saw what path that he took. We saw what path that Stokely took. We also saw what path John Lewis took. They was all in snake.
right.
So we ain't seen this. We ain't seen this.
And John Lewis will always be a white hero, and
He will
Rap Brown and
always
Stokely
be that.
Carmichael will never be white heroes.
Folks act like did nobody else get beat up on that bridge. And
He got he,
John Lewis walked across the bridge. And what happened to Sister Boynton? What happened to all the other folks who got beat on the bridge?
well. I always say John Lewis got more out of an ass whooping than I ever did.
I mean, and so we've seen this, and we continue to see this. We saw Jesse Jackson. You go back and you look at the thing, Jesse Jackson and Gary. I want an independent party. Then this nigga running for the he want to be the Democratic nominee. We've seen this.
But that is why these conversations, I believe, are so important, because this helps us drill down to the real
Yes.
issues that we need to address. But not only do we need to have these conversations and address them, then we need to start pushing that agenda, because we come to some answers and some solutions by having these conversations, talking about how we have over romanticized these things. And so we have to be conscientious about when we are talking to people, and especially young people, about this, and trying to educate them that we are not over romanticizing it when we're talking to them right off. That's what comes to my mind right off. That from now on, if I'm talking to somebody, I'm not gonna over romanticize this, because I tend to do that. We do that, as Larry said. That's something natural that we do. But I have to make a conscious thought, and because we've had the opportunity to observe this and analyze it and have the free will to read, then we are at a better point than they were previously, when they didn't have these same opportunities to sit down and analyze these things and make them a real issue. And we had an opportunity to make them a real issue, and now we have people that just won't do it, that are
And
in
on top of
leadership.
that,
All of that is
and
awesome, Gerald. Like, cause again, like, so like, even like that last point that you just said, like, we have a unique vantage point, which
We do.
with to go back and look at these things. So you can look at David Walker
come on,
and
man. Come on,
Carter
man.
G. Woodson the same way.
The same
Mhm.
way. Come on, boy.
So folks learned about David Walker's appeal the same way that folks learned about Carter G. Woodson underground. Now, so like now we talk about Carter G. Woodson like blah 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 blah. That stuff was getting passed. Or that there was a whole operative network passing Carter G. Woodson's teachings all over the place. Much of it, I'd imagine, is fomented by Omega Psi Phi. But that's what it was. That's how it got from the East Coast to the, to Central, to Southeast, to the West, and and then him coming to the, to Middle America. All it, like, it was the same type of piece. What we're doing now, it's just that same kind of piece. And so, go ahead, Mike Jones.
No, I was gonna say, we've done this for some years now, and I don't know what anybody else gets out of it, but I get a ton out of it. So I'll show up as long as we together. We're gonna be like the modern jazz quartet. We'll be a jazz group to just stay together for 30 years, because we had something to play with each other every time we showed up. But what I know I've done over the last 7 or 8 years, like in politics, and I don't do anything anymore, but folks call me, I talk to them, and everybody, and Larry, I think about this from a basketball or sports metaphor. Everybody wants to ask me, well, what should I do? And what I tell them, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you how you need to think about the game, because that's what a coach does. You have to play the game yourself. I don't know what you're going to see at any given point in time. There's a myriad of circumstances. The game is fluid. It changes every minute, just like life changes every day. But here's how you should think about the game. And this is how you should think about your position in the game. And this is what you should be looking for. We don't, we do a poor job of teaching in this regard. Somebody comes, a student, a child comes to you with a question, and most bad teachers, I don't want to say bad parents who are not aware, the adult, I won't say the adults, that's what I want to say, want to answer the question. What you need to do is always take that question and take it up another level. So that said, you asked me about this, but your question really is about something larger than that. So I'm going to take the opportunity of your question to explain to you a bigger principle that you're really rolling around in. So that when you leave here, not only do you have the answer to your question, but your intellectual universe has been expanded.
I'll give you a real time example. Yesterday we went and supported Gates and Summers. You know, Gates, your frat brother, is the coach of Mizzou's basketball
Right.
team. Summers is one of Gates' old assistant coaches. Last year took the job at Cleveland State. And while we were there assembled, I asked him two questions because I don't know the definitions of them now. What is an assist? Because it used to be I pass you the ball, you only take one dribble and score, I get an assist. That's
Right.
not the case anymore. Then I asked him what a foul was. He said, a foul now is anything that disrupts the flow of the game. Your best two players on the team, for each team, are going to get preferential treatment. And that's the way it works because we approach this as a business. Now, when I asked that question, people thought I was crazy. But the vast majority of folks never had a working definition of what a foul is in the first place.
No, Larry, what it is, you seen what a foul and an assist, how it has
It's
changed,
evolved.
evolved over
Exactly.
time, right? Okay.
Exactly. And so that's
How the
so
layup has evolved. Now you have the
exactly.
gather.
Exactly. But he elevated that just as you just stated. And that's what
Right.
has to happen.
And he told you why it looks like this now. Because we
Why
don't
it
play
looks,
basketball for basketball's sake no more. We in the entertainment business.
come on now.
And I'm old enough to remember when you watch the NBA game and or you could hear the referee, or if you there, the call was no harm, no foul. Okay, not that and even if you were in
No
school,
blood, no foul.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
For us.
And somebody, if you were playing, somebody quote fouled you unquote, and they say you want it, you say no, not because you didn't foul me. You fouled me, but that ain't why I missed the shot. So that was the other thing. As a matter of fact, you were even taught to play through fouls. Okay. And now and because before basketball, like football, like baseball, all sports, the fan base was the people who really enjoyed and understood the nuances of the game. But for these to be multi-billion dollar industries, you have to be able to attract the casual fans, that you have to entertain people. So now you got people watching basketball games that don't know shit about basketball. And that's why the difference between jazz and popular music. You'll never need anything more than a club for jazz. Because what you got to bring to jazz, the mass of people ain't gonna do this. And they only have symphony buildings because they need them for the orchestra, not for the not not for the attendance. But because the reality is, the more you get into something, the more you have to understand it. But and you have to work at that, whatever that is. But most people just want a superficial. Real coffee drinkers never drink instant coffee. If all you got is hot water and something in the jar, I don't want that. Now they'll, they may do the French press, they may do the mocha cup thing, but the point is, I don't drink instant coffee because that really ain't coffee.
That's correct.
Mike, one of the things you just noted is just about how poorly we're doing at teaching. But one of the reasons why is how poorly we're educated. Right. And so we don't think like that, right? So we swear that we da 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 da, but like,
Are we being educated or trained, Doc?
We're being trained.
and so when when I was at Morehouse freshman year, my English teacher was Dr. Pickens. Dr. Pickens at some point was one of Dr. King's roommates.
He went to 3 schools with Kings. I had Pickens also.
And so Dr. Pickens, he assigned a position paper. Was the Children's Crusade morally right? Dr. King's boy is teaching us to critique Dr. King. And so, so the question has to be, where is that happening? Right? And so, and we say stuff like today, like that's the reason why I like social media is because it allows me to people watch without leaving my house. That's why I like it. And so I am always amazed, and I referenced it earlier, at anybody who says this is what they don't want you to know. Well, and if that's what you believe, why not know it? This is but that's just now in the realm of social media. Dr. Clark said, "Ain't nobody hiding nothing from you." Dr.
And,
Clark.
and Amos Wilson says, I'm amazed at all the information that they give us. I'm
Yes,
just amazed, constantly amazed at what they tell you. I mean, Project 2025 is a perfect example.
this stuff is always available. They not hiding nothing from us. It ain't both. It ain't we oppressed and they scared for us to know. They don't care. Because not that they don't care, is that they don't have to overreact in terms of what we know and don't know, because they dictate what we know and don't know. Now, where they overreact is where there is evidence that we've been moving. If we were not moving, there would not have been a Tea Party. If we were not moving, there would not have been a Trump rise in response to the Tea Party. If there were no movement, there would not be no hanging Chad. If there was no movement, there would be no crack epidemic. All of these things are in response to our continuous efforts to fight. Now, so the crazy thing about, to me is like, again, for people not to know what they're looking at. And that's how you can see kind of the cracks in our foundation, when you have so many people who could be looking at this thing and not know what we're looking at. And so, and so we talk about, so Larry knows my favorite piece. Y'all heard my favorite piece, pattern recognition. And
Mm.
so in order for you to do pattern recognition, you got to have fund of information and you have to have working memory. And so if you don't have, any kind of informational foundation, you can't possibly know what you're looking at relative to what has come, because that's what's required. And so going back to the falsification of consciousness, because because we take full responsibility for the efforts of the system, we can't get we can't en masse get to the response, to the right response, because too many of us take responsibility for the system itself as opposed to challenging, the behaviors and the actions and the manifestations of the system. We get stuck on, solely on what it looks like after having been through the system.
And the system is a narcissist that we fail to recognize,
And they keep telling us it's us and
and
it's
they
it.
keep telling the system tells us it is us. And there is when the system uses one of our faces for its execution, we still fail to realize that it's the system, and we fail to be able to identify who the entire victimhood of the system is. That petty criminal that has been subject to the oppression of the system, undertrained and educated, underfinanced, failed to secure health care, failed to secure employment, and puts on the criminal face. We've got to recognize that, of course, there's personal accountability, but that's still a systemic problem. The system is doing that. And we've got to quit letting the system off on these things, because the system will tell you need more police. That's fine, but why? Why do we need more police? And what can we do about this criminal, this petty criminal? So, I mean, I hear what you're saying loud and clear.
And so that is the piece. And so that's how it looks, and that's how, it's always gonna look to some degree. We just gotta continue to resist.
And that's a perfect time to summate. Let's get one thing to grow on and to work on this week from everyone. And we're going to start with you, Kwame.
I'm gonna work on the resistance part. That's what I'm gonna work on.
And
Building more,
let me
building
say
more,
this.
more
Your whole
resistance.
profession is your whole professional career is built on resistance. And so, I mean, let's take some credit too. Your whole thing has been sacrificed. I don't care what your week is. I know what your week is. So, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, Doc.
Oh, you fine. And I think that Dr. Alexander is right on point about that education part. And when he talks about the professor that he had at Morehouse that was challenging him to challenge King's theory, we that's a component that we are sorely missing right now. I said in graduations, college graduations, the last couple of years, you see very few students going into education. And when you go into our schools, you see very few black teachers, black principals, black administrators. I think one thing that integration did was it eliminated a significant amount of black teachers and black administrators, and we do need that as part of the resistance, because we
There's a
can't have
great
all these white women. We can't have all these white women teaching our children.
And that's another issue that we failed to address. A great book that I've read and I've got on the shelf, the Jim Crow Pink Slip, talks about the 100,000 black educators that were terminated as a result of I'm being too kind, that were fired and
Fire.
as a result of integration.
But
And
when I was in grade school, we had black principals and black teachers,
yes, indeed.
and that's very much absent in so many districts now.
Absolutely. I'm going to say before we go to Dr. Alexander, I think it's important that we decolonize everything. Ourselves. And when I say decolonize, I mean we've got to work on decolonizing our mind, our diets, our religious affiliations, and behaviors, our relationships. Everything needs to be on the table to decolonize and deconstruct because it's been forced upon us and it is not working for us. It's not. Dr. Alexander.
And this gets at what Gerald was talking about, like, so when you make when we're intentional, and this gets to what you're saying too, Larry. So when we're intentional, and and then we're going to decolonize the educational piece, so to speak. You ain't got to learn everything today.
Right.
You just got to pick what you're going to learn. And so this week I've been doing a deep dive on um, on St. Louis, and um, and so in order to understand why St. Louis looks the way it looks, then you literally you 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 have to start with um you got to start with them French folks who brought Africans into the area, and then you got to get to these other folks who brought Africans into the area. And then you got to get to the Civil War. And then you got to get to, or before you even get to the Civil War, you got to get to all of these manifestations of oppression that, again, we think happen somewhere else that are really about Missouri and St. Louis. And you can go all the way well into the 60s and 70s, and you find all of this legal stuff that is just precedent, all of this housing stuff, all of these federal lawsuits about housing and school desegregation that are all central to St. Louis. And if you learn these things and you start to understand these things, then you have a sense of why St. Louis looks the way it looks today. But you got to want to do that. And so you got to find, and for me, that's kind of what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about St. Louis, and I'm passionate about, Missouri more generally. Um, and, but more specifically, as it relates to Missouri, I'm passionate about Missouri because my family has been in Missouri since 1817. And so we've been here for a long, 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 long time. And so I got a vested interest in the state, but more so what it looked like for my people, and then ultimately, how that has impacted me. And so in order for us to do this work, people got to find, because it's enough stuff to study. People got to figure out what it is that moves them. It's not enough to talk about what we used to have. You gotta talk, you gotta figure out why we ain't got
Mm.
it. And so, you know, read about Mill Creek, read about the Ville, read about all of these places, you know, and you ain't got to, it ain't even got to be go back that far, because the same thing still happens. There is no major shopping center at 44 and Big Bend if the local government didn't come and take 2/3 of Meacham Park. That happened in the past 15 years. And so this stuff happens. they disappear Black communities. They are still disappearing Black communities. And so what happened in Mill Creek in the mid 50s into the 60s is still happening. But we'll be like, Black folks moved away. No, we be getting displaced. Certainly some Black folks who could left. But most Black folks get displaced. Forced displacement. It happened then, it happens now. you know. And so, but all of that kind of starts with figuring out what you're going to study. What is your interest? And it could be anything. Because we have a role in it. Whatever it is that's done, Black folks have done it. And you can find it in St. Louis.
And it's easier now than ever. We have a supercomputer in our pocket.
All
If
the time.
if I'm reading Dr. Alexander's white paper and I come across, as I would often do, a word that I don't understand, I can go to Google and get it defined and make a picture of it. And
Mhm.
while I'm standing in line at to get my haircut at my overly priced black barber, as my man would assume, I don't think you're overpriced, Tudor. I think you're right on point, Tootie. Um, I can look at all of those vocabulary words and all of those books right there on my phone. We've got to be very intentional about being scholarly and in the know. And there's something to be said about words. There's a reason why they're called spells, because words have an effect on us. And what do you do when you're putting words together? You're spelling. You're spelling. So we need to be when we referenced this earlier, when we talked about the effect of hip hop and so forth. We referenced it very tritely. But Mike Jones, please take us home.
Uh, I'm kind of where you guys are, but I started yesterday. It's kind of Thanksgiving, and this is my favorite holiday because it's always a 4 day weekend. Yeah, I love the food. The food lasts a couple 3 days if you wanted to, and ain't no pressure for presents and all the other bullshit that goes with holidays and stuff. So it's cool, and I started to try to begin to organize. Uh, uh, I'll say my intellectual closet, and I really started to all this information and data I've gathered. I was thinking about what you Charles said and what Larry just said. And yesterday I thought about our problem is life is a complex fraction. A complex fraction is a whole number attached to a fraction. And you can't do anything with two complex fractions. You can't add them, you can't subtract them, you can't multiply or divide them until you first convert them to their common denominators, and then you get them down to an element where they start to make sense, and you can do something with it. You can add, subtract, and multiply. And I decided yesterday that I'm gonna spend the rest of my time trying to figure out how to take what what's so complex about uh, our situation, or how we feel our situation is, and figure out how to say it, tell it, uh, in something that makes more orderly. So what everybody has been getting on me about on and off for the last 6 7 years, I actually got to take serious figuring out how to write this down. In From a black perspective, in this timeline, about what's important, what ain't important. The one thing I thought about earlier when we were, I think maybe when we went quote in the green room, but how you should never take white American or white Americans seriously about what they say they believe America is. Basically, it's all bullshit. I'm not. I'm not a a fan of the founding fathers, the framers, the creators of the American Republic. I recognize their profound historical impact, but they don't make my hierarchy of revered historical figures because of our relationship to them. Okay, so I just ain't gonna never put anybody that did that to me uh, on a pedestal. But I will acknowledge when people have done something profound. Okay, and they did something profound, and I'm gonna leave you with this to show you how shallow and and uncommitted, unsincere, whatever term of what you want to come up with, white people are about America. Donald Trump is the president of the United States, not one time, two times. It's clear of what he's doing now. And there's two groups, there are three groups of people. There's a small group that are resisting him. There's a smaller